One of the greatest magic tricks we see business people do with property. We're going to unveil it. Stay tuned.
I'm the ringleader, so listen up.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Morning Minutes. Myself, Michael Burgio Mark Novak, episode 1611. Is the magic, the business, all the property? I love this question. This concept was made very popular and mainstream through the movie founder about McDonald's, but obviously they did it in real life, but it became very popular through the movie. Mark, talk us through what this concept is and how can your average man, woman sitting at home who's a business owner be involved?
Look, in the beginning of starting, being in business or at the beginning of being in property, very, very hard. But I think as a business matures or as a business person matures, this goes for businesses, this goes for individuals in business. I think that investment in property is probably the only thing that actually really makes the money. I when I was in my early 20s, I was on the boat with one of the wealthiest people in Australia. We were a bit drunk and I was 22, 23, and they said to me, do you know what? He said, I've sold my business. I'm on the BRW top 100. And he said, everyone's missed it. And I said, missed what? He said, well, at that time, this is probably 25 years ago, he said, the business sold for, the first half of the business sold for just under 100 million, and the second half of the business sold for just over 300 million. And he said, can I tell you something? I said, yeah. He said, after I pay my partners, I said, partners? He said, after I pay my bank, my loans back, after I pay my tax, he said, I can't live off that amount of money that's left over. I said, what do you mean? He said, I'll tell you the real secret. He said, I own factories that are 10 times the size of a football field, and I own many of them. And the business that I've sold to, which is a worldwide company, is now my tenant for all of those factories. He had about 9 of them. And he was like, so he goes, everyone's like, oh my God, you just sold your business for an amazing amount of money. He said, but the reality was very different after tax and in my pocket. He said, but those factories I bought in the last 40 years of business, they are the ultra win or the ultra wealth that I've created, not the business. And I'll say that again to people today, that whether you're, working in a bank, PAYG, getting paid, or whether you're running your business, computer business in DY, property, put that business into a property that you own. Sometimes people are doing it in their super. There's magic to it.
Yeah,
Seriously, it really compounds.
and just even on a singular scale on the northern beaches, a lot of the industrial factories that I'm selling that are say worth $3 to $5 million, a lot of times had the one owner in there. As you said, they started their business up, they bought a property for their business. And I often ask them, going, so what's happening with your business? Are you selling it or anything like? No, it hasn't made money, or we're just closing the doors. So after 40 years, if they hadn't have bought that property, that would have just been closing the doors. But fortunately enough, they've bought the asset. Now they bought that asset for 400 grand. We're selling it for 4 million. It's a lot of times they're saying to me, they're making more out of this property than they ever did in business. Yeah. And that's just thinking long term. Like, we're all going to be pretty much working until we're 60 or 80 these days. So that's a long path forward. So
Yeah.
when you're thinking, well, what's the growth going to be? Everyone's looking at property 1 year, 2 years, oh, where's the best 5 years? But when you especially look at it over the last 40 years of property, where that growth can be. And like I just read a stat the other day, it was like the top 4 businesses failure rate, like 90% for this, 80% for this. Business is tough. But if you can just put the money into your property, set and forget, that's where we've seen a lot of the success, especially on the northern beaches, especially in Australia.
Well, and I think that it actually starts dwarfing as people get older in business, where even though the business is fantastic, the it just dwarfs that property. The way property compounds just dwarfs it. And we got onto this topic this morning, Michael and I. We were talking about people that have bought their own premises or could have bought their own premises in DY. Michael, you were talking about exiting at the right time, when you're selling, when
Yeah.
they're selling the asset as well. So, do you want to give that example of those two offices?
Yeah, like one thing I
Mm.
love about commercial property is having a great agent, having a great understanding of the market. You can make money on that asset. In residential, you've got to build a new kitchen, you've got to renovate, and sometimes the capital growth in that time frame doesn't mean you get more money. So you may have spent 50 grand and it's not a return. But with commercial property, especially what I see a lot of owner occupiers doing or savvy businesses, like there's one concept, I know a gentleman where he'll buy a vacant shop, because typically a vacant property worth, say, 900 grand tenanted, might be able to pick it up for 600 grand, 700 grand vacant. So he buys it at that, say, 600 grand, does the fit out, builds the business up as well as he can, puts a high rent on it as much as it's affordable, sells the business, holds on to the property. And just having that business tenanted, it's now worth, say, an extra couple hundred grand, refinance, sell it. And if now to do that, now a lot of people go, well, I don't have a business I can start up and keep changing. I've got my own business. Well, what you can do there, especially say the last few years before retirement or relocating, you put your business on a lease, which it probably already is for your tax purposes and super, but you put it as a high rent that you can afford. And let's say your shop, because I had an owner where the shop was worth vacant 500 grand, but we can sell it tenanted for 800 grand. Yep, you've got to do numbers, work out what the rent would have been, vice versa. It's not just an easy 1 + 1. You've got to work out a couple of things, but quite often or not, you're going to come out 50, 100 grand ahead. But also what some people may miss when they say, oh, it's only an extra 50 grand, but it's an extra 300 grand today. You're selling it today, you're cashing out. What could you buy today rather than waiting 3 years? And let's face it, in our world, especially with super funds only lending to properties with tenants, you get a lot more money and it's a lot saleable of an asset with a tenant in place. So you go from selling a property at sort of the hottest scenario, rather than waiting till you retire and selling it vacant where there's less people after it. So there's a great way as an owner occupier how you can leverage your current property.
I think if you want to be really smart, well said, Burge. I think if you want to be really, really smart, you've got to realize that you're gonna be at peak earnings with your income.
Yes.
I think if you're smart, by the time you get to peak earnings, you'll probably want to be pretty invested in something that's going to keep you floating as your earnings diminish or as you get into retirement. And it goes like that. So peak earning, so your property starts going like that, and your peak earnings start crossing downwards, right? So that will probably happen, I think, to people in their mid 50s, where they get over that peak earnings curve. So probably in your 30s and 40s, I think there should be an investment in something aside from your peak earnings that's actually going to have carriage and carry you through into retirement. And that's what we're talking about this morning when these businesses are buying, or these people in business buying their, the physio. He's
Yeah.
buying his office where he is. And at the time, it only cost 300 or 400 grand, but after 10 years, he's got it paid off. Or the barber who buys his little shop for a couple of 100 grand paid off. And what actually starts to happen is after he's paid that off, he just buys something else, because he's got the rent that he would normally pay. So he puts it towards something. And that's when his peak earnings will get to a stage where it starts plateauing, then it starts dropping off, but you find your property is going to just keep going like this all the time after it. So I would urge people to use their super, or use their some of their income, or in business use some of the rent to actually attribute to or some property purchases along their journey. So then that off that goes when you're in your sort of 50s and 60s. Whilst your peak earnings, they're going to drop off your peak earnings. Like, I don't know, in most people's world, like you see middle management, you see it happen very, very commonly, senior management or management in business.
I think the key is to remember, yes, you met your business, your core business, maybe say a physio, but your second business is that property. A lot of people neglect it, and you can neglect it and still make a bucket load of money with how our property growth is in Australia and the Northern Beaches. But give it some time and how you can leverage it. Even stuff like putting more money into your super by having your rent higher. There's a lot you can do. So I think first step is buying the asset for your business, and then also leveraging it, because as you said, the compound over 40 years is amazing.
It's incredible.
Kevin, hope you're well. Love the comments. Thank you. Watching on YouTube.
Happy days.
Beautiful.
Michael,
think that's
hopefully we've helped people out there today. Guys and girls, please share this. It's a live show. Please share it with people you may be or know in this situation. And if you want us to talk about any topics, most of the topics we talk about are actually people requesting what they want to hear. So that's where today came from, and other shows come from as well. So let us know.
Yes, and if you're a small business out there, especially on the Northern Beaches, and want to talk about your business, we would love to hear you on. I think some of our great podcasts, we're hearing about local business owners, what they do in the property, and I'd love to get that kickstarted up and running more.
Big time. Mr. Burgio, thank you very much.
Cheers.
See you guys.
Bye.